The story begins in a quiet kitchen with a pot boiling on the stove. Suddenly, the peaceful mood is shattered by an emergency broadcast from the television. On the screen, an anchor repeats the alert, showing just how serious the situation is. Then he announces that a mysterious labyrinth has been confirmed in the Shibuya district. With that, all nearby residents are ordered to evacuate the area immediately. The strange floating object glows intensely as the labyrinth alert continues. At this moment, soldiers are already on the street, helping people get out of the area safely. In the midst of the chaos, a frightened little girl gets swept away by the desperate, fleeing crowd. People look up, terrified by the presence of that giant thing in the sky. The scene is set in Japan, and the army arrives with tanks to deal with the threat. Suddenly, the portal begins to open, releasing a massive amount of energy, and from inside, a bizarre creature starts to emerge, sending everyone into a panic. The creature emerges with such force that the ground shatters from the impact of its arrival. Finally, the monster comes out completely, revealing its giant, purple insect-like form. The military quickly identifies it as an enemy and prepares for combat. The creature stares down the humans with its glowing eyes, ready to cause destruction. Without hesitation, the commander orders all vehicles to prepare to fire, but a soldier warns his captain that civilians haven't finished evacuating the area yet. The captain knows the risk, but understands the damage will be far worse if they don't stop the monster right then and there. So, all the tanks aim their cannons in the direction of the enormous purple creature, and with the fire command given, a gigantic explosion lights up the entire city. Several tanks fire at the same time in a coordinated attack against the invader. The monster is engulfed in the flames and explosions from the shells fired by the tanks. After the attack, a cloud of smoke covers the entire street as helicopters fly overhead. But to everyone's surprise, the creature is still standing in the middle of the smoke. A soldier reports that the target is still active and without a single scratch on its body. The captain is shocked, as it was a direct hit from a 120mm armor-piercing shell. The monster then glares at its attackers, and its eyes begin to glow with a purple light. A huge amount of energy gathers in its mouth, preparing to fire, and in an instant, a devastating energy beam is fired toward the soldiers. The energy beam scores a direct hit on the tanks, which are completely obliterated. Inside one of the vehicles, a soldier watches the light approach with pure terror on his face. Then, all the tanks are sent flying by the absurd force of the monster's attack. A giant explosion follows, wiping out everything in its path. With that, civilians panic and run desperately away from the destruction. It's explained that these mysterious structures that appeared in the world are called labyrinths, and the monsters that come out of them have been named enemies by humanity. These creatures couldn't be destroyed by existing weapons, leaving a trail of destruction. Because of this, humanity was devastated, with no chance to fight back. Suddenly, several smaller, flying monsters appear and start attacking the civilians. One of these winged beings attacks a man in the middle of the crowd without any mercy. At that moment, the little girl from before trips and falls to the ground amid the chaos, and one of the flying creatures approaches her, ready to attack the defenseless child. The monster raises its sharp claws to deliver the final blow to the little girl, but before it could do anything, a red flash suddenly cuts through the air. In the blink of an eye, the monster is sliced in two by a swift and precise cut. The girl curls up on the ground, protecting herself as the creature is defeated in front of her. And then, a mysterious man appears with a glowing sword to save her. The girl looks up, surprised and relieved to see that someone has come to her rescue. It's revealed that inside the labyrinths, unknown weapons were discovered, and these weapons were the only thing capable of defeating the terrible enemies. The savior turns, and we see that he has very striking red hair and eyes. He then asks the little girl, she's still in one piece after all the commotion. The girl gets scared and notices the red eyes of the young man who saved her. The hero is a bit confused by her reaction and looks to the side, not understanding. Suddenly, a piece of a building starts to fall toward them. The girl looks up again, terrified by the new threat approaching. The young man then asks if his left eye is bothering her in any way. With tears in her eyes, the girl is in shock and can't answer the question. In the background, more monsters appear, ready to attack the city and cause more destruction. He then tells the girl that his eye is just a little special and different. Meanwhile, the giant monster fires another energy beam in their direction. The powerful attack hits the ground and creates a gigantic crater, kicking up a lot of dust. At that moment, a car that was thrown by the explosion is falling to crush them. But the young man repeats that his eye is special, and its power activates with an intense glow. It's then explained that these weapons surpass technology, and the strongest is the Regulus arm. With that, a large golden magic circle forms in the air, indicating the use of the ability. The little girl curls up on the ground, frightened by everything happening around her. But she opens her eyes a little to see what her savior is doing to protect her. And as she looks up, the girl is completely shocked by what she's seeing. The car and the monster's energy beam are completely frozen in time. It's revealed that this ability works on everything within his field of vision. He can stop the time of any object, which is why his eye is considered divine. The name of this power is the Eye of Chronostasis, and he won't let the monster win. The little girl is speechless as she understands the red-haired young man's incredible ability. But the hero reveals that there is a price to pay every time he uses this power. His vision shows an interface with a life counter at 27 years, and as soon as he activates the power, his lifespan begins to decrease rapidly. He explains that using the Eye of Chronostasis consumes his own life expectancy. In just a few seconds, his life counter already shows he's lost a whole year. Even so, he says that it doesn't matter and draws a gun to face the enemy. We discover that to use the weapons, one must offer their lifespan as payment. To use the pistol, he spends 30 days of his remaining lifespan. Then, the interface shows that the gun's cartridge has begun to recharge with energy. A loading bar appears in his vision, and it fills up quickly. The young man's eye glows intensely as he concentrates on his next move. He points the gun to the sky, and it begins to shine with a powerful golden light. With the cartridge loaded, the interface announces that dual chronostasis has been activated. The pistol becomes enveloped in a red energy, ready to be fired. With the particles charged and focused, he prepares to launch the final attack. The interface announces that the weapon is finally ready to fire. With that, the crosshairs lock onto the giant monster's energy attack. The young man then says with a smile that he's going to put an end to this creature. Without hesitating for a second, he pulls the trigger with all his might, and a powerful red energy beam is fired from his pistol. His shot scores a direct hit on the attack the monster had launched earlier. At that moment, the two energy attacks collide in an explosion of light. The hero's shot is stronger and continues to advance toward the creature. The attack hits the monster head-on, causing a huge impact. With that, a gigantic red explosion occurs and engulfs the creature. The monster's body begins to completely fall apart because of the attack. Little by little, the creature is disintegrated by the intense red light, until finally, there's nothing left of the enemy that was attacking the city. The young man stands there as the monster's remains vanish into the air. With the threat eliminated, time returns to normal, and the car crashes to the ground. He then thinks that he needs to at least earn back the lifespan he spent. Shortly after, the interface confirms that the enemy has been completely destroyed, and a new message appears saying he has received a life count. It's explained that by defeating enemies, it's possible to gain a new lifespan, and his life counter suddenly jumps up to 33 years in total. The little girl watches all of this, trembling with fear and not understanding a thing. Noticing her state, the young man turns to speak with the small survivor. He gives a gentle smile to try and calm the girl down after the big scare, but suddenly, a shadow flies quickly over the two of them. It was another flying monster, which arrives by attacking one of its companions. The young man picks up the girl and observes the other enemies that are still nearby. At that moment, a blue-haired girl lands right in front of them. The newcomer announces that they've finished their work on their side as well. She says they're ready to go, and he comments that it's good to have reliable allies. The little girl watches their interaction, still scared but a little calmer. The red-haired young man then approaches the little girl he saved. He kneels down and says that she's safe, and that his team will find her family. The little girl tearfully thanks him for saving her life from that monster. Then, out of curiosity, she asks for the name of her red-haired hero. He replies that his name is Mogami Tendo, and that he's a type of soldier called a raider. After that, the group prepares for the next mission, and he calls them to conquer the labyrinth. We see Tendo's determined face, ready to take on any challenge that comes his way. It's explained that raiders are humanity's last guardians who fight against the enemies. The girl watches in awe those who saved her and protect the world, and this is the story of how a boy who was a nobody became the strongest raider. With that, Tendo and his team walk toward the entrance of the dangerous portal. The scene changes to a night in Shinjuku, where some bullies are surrounding someone. The victim is thrown hard onto the ground, his belongings scattering across the street. The leader of the bullies complains that hitting the kid is worse than wailing on a punching bag. We find out the boy getting beat up is Tendo, a 16-year-old student who curses his bad luck. He's really annoyed to be bothered by a bunch of losers. One of the bullies gets a little scared and suggests that maybe they should stop. The leader asks why he's afraid, and the other says that his younger brother is. The other bullies also get nervous as they remember who the boy's relative is. Suddenly, the mysterious shadow of a man in a white coat appears in the alley. The white-haired man with an eye patch stares down the bullies with a very cold look. The bullies recognize him as the younger brother and genius of the Mogami brothers. He is Mogami Reiji, the national raider, and he tells the bullies to get out of his way. Completely terrified, the bullies think that Reiji is going to finish them right there, but the group's leader refuses to leave and faces the newcomer with a defiant look. However, Reiji simply ignores the bully and continues walking down the dark alley. He walks toward his older brother, who is still on the ground. Tendo looks up and recognizes his younger brother with surprise and shame. Without showing any emotion, Reiji just looks at his brother and calls him pathetic. He then criticizes Tendo for not having the courage to fight back, even when he's getting beaten up. The bullies laugh and say the rumors are true, and Reiji really hates his brother. On the ground, Tendo laments how pathetic it is to be abandoned like that by his own brother. The bullies notice the girl with Reiji, and the redhead thinks that even she is on another level. The raider duo then turns and starts to walk away from the dark alley. Reiji's companion looks at him with a confident smile on her face. Tendo watches the girl from a distance and wonders who she could be. The bullies continue to taunt him about the huge difference between the twin brothers. The red-haired young man then wonders when his relationship with his brother became like this. A flashback begins, showing that everything changed because of that fateful day. He remembers that when they were kids, he thought they could do anything together. Back then, young Tendo was full of courage and wasn't afraid of anything at all. But all that confidence he felt had no real basis. And all of that was destroyed 5 years ago, when a labyrinth appeared in front of him. The young boy looks up, completely terrified by the situation. Suddenly, the ground begins to open up, and cracks swallow his entire family. He screams in pure terror as he sees his parents and brother being pulled into the darkness. All of them fall into a bottomless pit that appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the park. The labyrinth that suddenly appeared swallowed them, all without a trace. And in the end, his entire family was taken inside that mysterious portal. That was the day of the first major incident involving a labyrinth in the city. The scene then cuts to the front of a large hospital at night. Inside, Tendo is sitting alone on a bench, covered by a blanket. Then the sad news is revealed, as the only person who came back alive was Reiji. On television, a reporter shows Reiji's rescue, and Tendo thinks that he couldn't do anything. But he corrects himself and realizes the harsh truth about what really happened. In reality, he didn't do anything because he just trembled in fear and cried desperately. And he didn't even reach out a hand to his younger brother, who was asking for help. With that, the boy lowers his head, filled with guilt and remorse for his failure. That terrible incident completely separated the two brothers' paths, and Reiji became the most famous raider in Japan, and the youngest to ever clear a labyrinth. Meanwhile, Tendo feels like a failure who can never get anywhere. He hears other people calling him the genius's bud, and feels completely useless. The red-haired young man lowers his head, sad about his own situation. He doesn't know who started that nickname, but he admits they hit the nail on the head. The only stain on the reputation of the genius Mogami Reiji was his useless twin brother, and that brother was him, Mogami Tendo, the family failure. Back in the alley, the bullies continue to beat up Tendo relentlessly. He's on his knees on the ground as the bullies surround him to continue the beating. The redhead believes that Reiji still hates him for not saving him in the past. But even so, he feels powerless and doesn't know what he could possibly do. He thinks that he can't even stand up to scum like these bullies. Suddenly, the bullies notice something strange behind the red-haired boy on the ground. Tendo looks up and sees a purple light reflected in his eyes. Confused, he wonders what's happening at that moment, and to his astonishment, a large labyrinth appears right in the middle of the dark alley. Tendo and the bullies are thrown back by the portal's energy. He looks up and confirms that it really is a labyrinth. A drop of purple energy falls from the portal and begins to spread across the ground. The dark energy advances quickly toward Tendo like a shadow. He tries to run, but the shadow catches up to him and begins to completely envelop him. The boy is pulled in by the mysterious energy with no chance of escape. The shadow consumes him whole, leaving only an empty space behind. Suddenly, he finds himself floating in a digital space with several messages appearing. The messages confirm that he is a non-user and his bodily functions are recovering. Then, a new Conqueror registration is successfully completed in the system. A screen appears in front of him with a welcome message to the labyrinth. After that, a blue portal opens and sucks him into an unknown place. Tendo wakes up in a strange place with stone walls and giant pillars. He groans in pain as he tries to get up and figure out where he is. Around him, he only sees a dark hallway and a bright light on the ceiling. He looks around, confused, not knowing where he ended up. The boy gets up and sees that he's in a huge hall with many people. Tendo asks himself where he is and realizes that the others are also waking up. He concludes that he must be inside a real labyrinth. Suddenly, his left eye begins to glow with an intense blue light. Tendo rubs his eyes, not understanding what's happening to him. But when he opens them again, the blue light is still shining in his pupil. His vision now shows an interface with a lifespan counter. The counter shows that he has 69 years of life remaining. Completely shocked, Tendo can't believe what he's seeing. The bullies also wake up and start seeing the same strange numbers. He realizes that the bullies were also swallowed by the labyrinth. Tendo becomes even more confused by the situation and what he's seeing in his vision. Then he notices that one of the bullies' life counters is at 83 years. The red-haired boy says he doesn't understand anything that's happening anymore. One of the bullies points to something at the end of the hall and asks what it is. Tendo turns and sees two stone pedestals with something on top of them. He's surprised to see what's on the stone pedestals. In disbelief, he gets closer to get a better look at what it is. And to his surprise, on top of each pedestal, there's a sword stuck in it. He wonders if that's a real sword in the middle of the hall. Tendo thinks that if this place is a labyrinth, then that must be a weapon. He reaches out his hand to grab one of the swords, ready to defend himself. The leader of the bullies interrupts him and says that's one of those weapons. He's heard that they're incredible and wants to grab one for himself. The bully shoves Tendo and calls him a bug to get to the sword first. With a wicked smile, the bully says he's going to take the weapon from his hands. But suddenly, he stops and asks Tendo what he just said. Tendo also grabs a sword and asks why the bully is talking to himself. And with that, the two face off with swords in hand, ready for a confrontation. Suddenly, a mysterious voice speaks directly in Tendo's head. The voice says that to obtain the weapon, it's necessary to spend 30 years of life. Tendo is shocked to hear that he needs to pay with 30 years of his life. The bully ignores him and charges forward to attack the boy with the sword in hand. Tendo's vision focuses on the bully, and his life counter appears, and to his surprise, the bully's lifespan drops from 83 to 53 years. Tendo realizes that those numbers really do show people's lifespans. He concludes that the bully lost 30 years of his life by picking up the sword, but the bully doesn't care and celebrates that with the weapon, he'll be the strongest. He brags that he'll be even stronger than the famous Mogami Reiji. Suddenly, a white monster with sharp claws appears and attacks the bully from behind. The bully's friend looks on in shock as his companion is attacked. The monster sinks its claws into the bully's head, who has no time to react. In an instant, the creature defeats him, and he falls to the ground, lifeless. Tendo's eyes widen as he sees the monsters that have appeared in the hall. Several white creatures with pink eyes appear and surround the humans. Tendo screams in fear, recognizing those creatures as the fearsome enemies. One of the monsters approaches him, ready to attack the defenseless boy. Tendo is paralyzed with fear as the creature prepares for its attack. The monster that took down the bully turns to dust and disappears completely. Tendo notices that the bully turned into sand after being defeated, and his vision shows the bully's life counter completely zeroed out. With that, Tendo understands that the numbers really do show their lifespan. One of the creatures attacks the other bullies who were in the hall. The monsters continue their relentless assault against the defenseless humans. Tendo looks at his sword and notices that the monsters are dirty. The white creatures are covered in red marks and scratches. He realizes the situation is very bad and that they are in great danger. Tendo looks at his sword and wonders what he should do now. With his heart racing, he grips the weapon tightly, ready to fight. Without a second thought, Tendo also spends 30 years of his life to take the sword. With that, his life counter suddenly drops to just 39 years. He screams in despair and runs away from the monsters to try and survive. Tendo complains that he took the sword on pure impulse and wishes there was a confirmation screen. He reaches the end of the hallway and realizes he's at a dead end. The boy turns around and sees one of the white monsters running toward him. The creature stares at him with its glowing pink eyes, ready for the attack. Tendo thinks that if the sword is a weapon, it must be able to defeat the enemy, but he doubts his own ability and wonders if he can really do it. With a heart full of fear and anger, he grips the sword's hilt tightly. Tendo charges forward with a war cry and swings the sword at the monster, but the creature is faster and easily dodges his attack. The red-haired boy is shocked by the enemy's speed. The monster leaps over him and prepares for a quick counterattack. The creature lands a direct hit on his back with its sharp claws. Tendo screams in pain as he feels the monster's claws tearing at him. He falls to the ground, bleeding and with no strength left to fight. The enemy's blow left a serious wound on his back. Tendo glares at the monster with hatred and frustration in his eyes. The creature slowly approaches to deliver the final blow to the injured boy. He wonders if this is all he can do and feels like a failure. With tears in his eyes, Tendo laments that in the end, he always gives up on everything. He feels like he's giving up again, just like he did in the past. But suddenly, Reiji appears and slices the creature in half with his sword of light. The younger brother stares at Tendo with a cold, serious look. Tendo looks at his savior, surprised and in disbelief at what he's seeing. Reiji calls him generous for giving up his life like that. He says it's pathetic to give up your life with a sword still in your hand. Tendo is speechless and can only manage to call out his brother's name. Lying on the ground, he grips the hilt of his sword with force and frustration. Reiji says that if Tendo has no will to live, then he can just go perish in a ditch somewhere. Tendo remains silent, just staring at his younger brother with a pained look. The white-haired brother then says that if he wants to survive, even in the face of certain doom, he should get behind him and trust in his skills to protect him. Reiji's sword glows with a blue light, and he promises he will get him home. Tendo is shocked by his brother's words and doesn't understand his attitude. He asks why Reiji would go so far to save him, even though he hates him so much. Meanwhile, one of the bullies screams in terror as he sees the monsters approaching. The bully begs the creatures not to come any closer to him and his friend. Tendo looks back and sees his brother facing the monsters with a determined look. Reiji says his personal feelings don't matter because he risks his life for others. He charges toward the monsters, ready to fulfill his duty as a raider, and with a confident smile, Reiji states that this is what it means to be a national raider. Tendo watches the scene with admiration and respect for his brother's courage. That image of his brother fighting the monsters was burned into his memory. He forgot the pain and fear and just etched that image into his mind's eye. Reiji charges forward and cuts down the monsters with his light sword in a deadly dance. The vivid image of the battle and his brother's back, like a hero's. The trail of the battle and the image of Reiji fighting bravely to protect them. To Tendo, his brother was a true hero in that moment. He compares him to the moon, which outshone the sun with its brilliance and power. Tendo looks at his brother with a mix of admiration and envy in his heart. Reiji turns and looks at his older brother with a look of superiority. The story of the labyrinths began 38 years ago in Berlin, Germany. After that, countless labyrinths began to appear all over the world. They appeared in places like New York and even Rio de Janeiro. Many research institutions studied the labyrinths to understand their origin, but they only managed to learn 3 things about these mysterious portals. The first is that the only way out is at the end of the labyrinth, at its deepest point. And the second is that the enemies born inside will eventually come out into the world. The third thing is that the only weapons that can take down the enemies exist only inside, and those who dive into these unknown labyrinths are called raiders. Reiji leads the group of survivors through the dark corridor of the labyrinth. Tendo thinks that this is all he knows about the dangerous labyrinths, but his brother says he's almost right, but there's more to know. Reiji explains that raider isn't a job title but something more. Tendo is confused by the explanation and doesn't understand what he means. The white-haired brother says that raiders are different from normal humans. Reiji asks if Tendo has also noticed the strange change in his body. The red-haired boy thinks for a moment and realizes he's right. He remembers the strange voice he heard before arriving in that place. And he also remembers the interface that appeared in his vision. Tendo looks at his hand and sees the life counter, which now reads 37 years. Reiji looks at him with a disdainful glance and realizes he still doesn't get it. Tendo is surprised and asks why his life counter decreased again. Reiji explains that the number shows his lifespan and that he's already figured that out. When a raider takes damage, their wounds are automatically healed by consuming life. Tendo then looks at his leg, which was injured by the monster earlier. He remembers the creature's attack and how its claws tore his skin. And to his surprise, the wound on his leg is already completely healed. Tendo is impressed by the raiders' ability to heal quickly, but Reiji warns him that if he loses all of his life, he's done for. Tendo looks at his brother with a serious expression, understanding the gravity of the situation. Reiji says that once someone becomes a raider, they must forget about a normal end. The redhead remembers the bully who was defeated and turned into sand. The more serious the injury, the more lifespan is burned to heal it. Reiji glances at a monster hiding behind a pillar and prepares to attack. He brandishes his sword and gets into position to face the new threat. Several white monsters appear in the hallway, ready to attack the group. Tendo shouts desperately, warning his brother about the enemies that have appeared. But the white-haired young man leaps, and with a single sword strike, he cuts down all the monsters in mid-air. Tendo is speechless and can only manage to stammer his younger brother's name. Reiji moves with incredible speed, defeating all the creatures with his glowing blade. The red-haired boy is completely shocked and doesn't understand what just happened. With the sword in his hand, he realizes his brother defeated all the enemies in a single instant. The white-haired raider then calmly sheathes his sword after the battle. He explains that to take down an enemy, you have to destroy their core to gain lifespan. Tendo then wonders what this core his brother mentioned could be. He looks at the ground and sees a red crystal in the middle of the monster's remains. The redhead lets out an awkward laugh and thinks he could never hit a target that small. Suddenly, his eyes go wide as he notices something strange in his vision. With that, the interface in his eye focuses on Reiji and shows a lifespan of 189 years. A new monster emerges from the shadows and charges quickly to attack the two brothers. But the creature suddenly stops and falls to the ground in pieces before reaching them. Then, the sound of footsteps gets everyone's attention as a boot steps firmly on the ground. A blue-haired girl appears and reveals herself as Officer Yui Mizusaki, Captain Mogami. The younger brother recognizes her and says, He's glad to see her safe and sound. Reiji asks for the status, and she says all the civilians she found are here, but she regrets that many people had already been defeated before she could help them. Suddenly, Tendo shouts and points toward the newcomer with a look of surprise. He says he recognizes her because he saw her meeting with Reiji in the alley earlier. Without a second thought, the redhead asks if she's his brother's girlfriend. The white-haired young man questions what he means by that, and Tendo plays it off. The pair gets annoyed, and Reiji calls her his subordinate, while she says she has the right to choose. Yu then looks at the red-haired boy with suspicion and asks who he is. With that, Reiji reluctantly replies that the boy is his older brother. Tendo holds out his hand with a forced smile and asks if it's a pleasure to meet her. The blue-haired girl glares at him with disgust and asks if that fake smile is on purpose. The young man's smile becomes even more crooked, and he starts to sweat, seeing her reaction. He trembles and concludes that she is Reiji's subordinate, who asks about the enemies she saw. The white-haired brother finds it strange that there are so few enemies there and feels that something bad is about to happen. With that, he orders Mizusaki to take the civilians to the labyrinth exit while he investigates. The white-haired young man says he's going to check another passage, and Yu tells everyone to follow her. Tendo gets worried and calls out his younger brother's name as he walks away, but Reiji completely ignores him and continues walking into the darkness of the corridor. The redhead then realizes he didn't even thank him for being saved once again. Meanwhile, Yui points to a glowing portal and announces that it's the exit to the outside world. She asks everyone to remain calm and leave in an orderly fashion as Tendo watches the line. The blue-haired girl looks at the situation with a serious and focused expression. Then she turns to Tendo and scolds him for just standing there doing nothing in the middle of the path. Suddenly, a giant, dark rift appears in the air right above the labyrinth's exit. The officer is completely shocked to see the new threat that appeared out of nowhere. Yu then turns and faces the mysterious rift with a determined look on her face. From within the rift, a gigantic black sword begins to emerge slowly. The blue-haired girl is startled by the size and appearance of that bizarre weapon. Without hesitation, she leaps and attacks the giant sword with a powerful downward strike. The impact of the blow is so strong that the officer is pushed back by the weapon's force. She grits her teeth and wonders what kind of absurd power is pressing down on her. Then, a shadowy figure holding the sword is revealed in the darkness of the rift. The creature has the appearance of a black knight, and its image seems to be glitching. The monster's armor is covered in rings and has a purple glow on its helmet. The knight then swings its sword and easily flings the blue-haired girl away. Tendo watches the scene, terrified by the power of that new and terrible creature. Yui is thrown with such force that she creates a gigantic crater in the hall's floor. The explosion kicks up a lot of dust and pieces of rock everywhere. The red-haired boy is completely stunned and wonders what just happened there. Amidst the rubble, we see that the officer has been completely defeated by the Black Knight. He remembers that while everyone was heading for the exit, the creature suddenly appeared. Suddenly, a red flash fills his vision as something hits him in the face. And to his horror, he realizes the Black Knight attacked him in the blink of an eye. With a hand on his face, Tendo realizes he's covered in his own red liquid, and the system interface announces that he suffered a cut on his face and left eye. The red-haired boy screams in pain as he faces the Black Knight that attacked him. He panics when he sees that his remaining lifespan is 37 years. Then the interface announces that the repair has begun, and his counter drops to 35 years. The Black Knight stares at him with its glowing purple eyes, ready to attack again. The shadowy creature prepares to deliver the final blow to the defenseless boy on the ground. With its giant sword in hand, the monster charges to end the boy's life. The knight swings its weapon with all its might toward Tendo on the ground, but before it could hit him, Reiji appears and blocks the attack with his own sword. Tendo is completely shocked to see his younger brother saving him again. The white-haired young man struggles to hold back the Black Knight's powerful blow. The two swords clash in a violent impact that shakes the entire hall. With that, Reiji's blade begins to shatter from the enemy's absurd strength. The knight hits Regi's arm with a powerful and impactful blow. The creature continues to press on with its sword and breaks the raider's defense. With that, the white-haired young man's left arm is sent flying. He is shocked to see that his powerful claymore sword has been broken in half. He wonders what kind of enemy this is, as he's never seen a humanoid one before. The white-haired young man starts to sweat, realizing the danger of the situation. In the background, he sees the pile of civilians who were defeated by the Black Knight. He looks at his injured arm with a look of pure frustration and anger. The raider remembers his fallen subordinate and admits it was an error in judgment. He laments that he didn't want to spend his precious lifespan in a place like this. Then, the white-haired young man decides to remove his eye patch to fight seriously. Without the eye patch, his power activates, and a green aura envelopes his sword and his body. Tendo screams in desperation, warning that his brother's arm is still injured. But Reiji says that losing one or two arms is nothing for a conqueror. The red-haired boy gets even more worried, because he knows the healing isn't free, and the interface confirms that to heal himself, Reiji is spending a lot of his lifespan. The raider's life counter plummets from 189 to 150, 6 years. Tendo is astonished that his brother still wants to fight, and the young man says that time is precious. With his eye glowing red, the younger brother says he'll end the fight in an instant. His special ability, called the Eye of Chronostasis, is finally activated for combat. A magic circle glows intensely in his red eye, showing that the power is ready. Tendo desperately screams to his brother about the arm he lost in the fight. Then he sees his relative's life counter plummeting and panics at the amount. The raider's life drops from 189 to 150, 6 years in seconds. But the white-haired boy says he can't waste time and will end it all in an instant. With that, he charges toward the Black Knight to protect his fallen older brother. And the system interface confirms that the Eye of Chronostasis has been successfully activated. The Black Knight prepares to strike with its giant sword and a golden aura. The genius charges at high speed, while the monster leaps for a direct confrontation. Reiji's red eye glows intensely, showing that his ability is at its maximum. With incredible agility, the raider slides under the knight for a surprise attack. He then strikes the monster with a swift and precise blow, aiming for its weak spot. But to his surprise, the attack doesn't cause the damage he expected on the creature. The hero lands on the ground and realizes the Black Knight barely felt his blow. The creature turns to him without a single scratch on its tough armor. The monster's eye glows with a pink light as it coldly stares down its opponent. Reiji then admits the enemy is tough and he couldn't destroy the core in one hit. He realizes this creature is on a completely different level from the other enemies. The Black Knight turns and faces the raider with a very menacing posture. Suddenly, the monster uses a type of energy whip to attack from a distance. The white-haired boy realizes the attack isn't for him, but for his brother. Without hesitation, he activates the Eye of Chronostasis again to save his relative. The energy whip stops in mid-air, right in front of Tendo's terrified face. With that, Reiji moves at high speed and places himself in front of his brother to protect him. Time stops, and Tendo falls backward, completely shocked by what just happened. The raider lands hard on the ground, ready to intercept any other attack. His red eye glows once more, confirming the ability is active. The knight attacks again, but the younger brother is ready to block with his sword. The energy whip hits the ground, creating a large explosion of dust and rocks. The white-haired boy manages to block the blow, but the impact of the explosion is very strong. He then taunts the monster, saying its real opponent is right there in front of it. Tendo watches the intense battle between his brother and the Black Knight in the middle of the hall. The red-haired boy stays on the ground, not understanding anything that's happening around him. He wonders what the heck has been happening all this time while he was down. The fight between the genius and the monster continues at high speed and with great intensity. Suddenly, the Black Knight stops in mid-air, surrounded by bright golden rings of light. The redhead is startled to see the enemy stop moving, as if it were frozen. That the creature remains completely motionless in the air, with its energy rings spinning around it. At that moment, The raider moves in to take advantage of the opening and attack the paralyzed monster. With a quick and precise strike, he lands a direct hit on the Black Knight with his light sword. Tendo wonders if that golden ring of light has something to do with all of this, but the rings shatter, and the knight starts moving again, attacking the white-haired boy. The redhead then realizes it's not the rings, but his brother's eye that's doing it. With his ability activated, the genius manages to land another powerful blow on the creature. The red-haired boy understands that it's Raiji's eye that is stopping the enemy. His brother is using that special power to fight on equal footing with the monster. But Tendo is confused and doesn't understand exactly how the eye's power works. Then, an interface shows that the knight also has a repair system for its injuries. At the same time, Reiji's life continues to drop and is now at 150 years. The counter doesn't stop decreasing, and Tendo is terrified to see it's already reached 155. The red-haired boy begins to understand the terrible truth about his younger brother's power. He wonders if that eye consumes his lifespan every time it's used. Meanwhile, the raider continues his relentless, non-stop attack on the Black Knight. With a direct hit, he finally manages to break the powerful enemy's helmet. The white-haired boy says he finally managed to crack the armor. But there's a problem. He realizes that with only one arm, he can't deliver a final blow to defeat the monster. With that, the creature seizes the chance to counterattack with its sharp wings. The Black Knight uses its tail like a whip and attacks the raider with all its might. The blow hits Reiji head-on, sending him flying with a huge impact in the hall. Seeing this, Tendo screams his younger brother's name in complete desperation. He realizes his brother is being overwhelmed and might not make it if this continues. With a heavy heart, the redhead grips the handle of his sword and says he has to help him, but then he doubts himself and wonders if he can really help. The boy feels useless and questions what someone like him could possibly do there. Suddenly, his younger brother yells at him, getting his attention in the middle of the battle. The raider asks how long he's going to stand there like a useless scarecrow. He yells for the redhead to get out of the way, because he's just getting in the way of the fight. Tendo lowers his head and agrees that his brother is right, and that he is just a blemish. He thinks that a genius like Reiji would never lose, because he is strong and different from him. The red-haired boy believes that the only thing a dead weight like him can do is to get out of there as fast as possible, so as not to bother his genius brother in battle. Suddenly, he looks to the side and sees something that leaves him completely shocked. He notices his brother's subordinate, Mizusaki, lying in the middle of the rebel. His raider vision focuses on the girl and shows she still has 39 years of life left. The blue-haired officer groans in pain, but is still conscious after the attack. Tendo is surprised and relieved to realize the girl is still alive. Then he turns his gaze back to his younger brother and begins to understand the situation. The red-haired boy realizes that Reiji was fighting to protect his subordinate and him. And even in that sorry state, he kept fighting so that no one would get hurt. But the white-haired raider yells at him not to stop and to keep moving forward. Tendo is paralyzed with guilt, thinking there is absolutely nothing he can do. He drops to his knees on the floor, completely frustrated with his own uselessness. Meanwhile, the battle rages on, and the genius stays focused on the Black Knight. The raider skillfully dodges another attack from the monster's energy whip. The dark creature doesn't give up and prepares another attack with its bizarre weapon, but Reiji manages to block the blow with his light sword in a swift motion. With that, the core in the Black Knight's chest cracks, even more from the impact. The younger brother and the monster stare at each other for a moment before the next move. The knight then unleashes a large amount of purple energy from its body, and several dark energy tentacles emerge to attack the raider all at once. The genius is caught by surprise and gets trapped by the enemy's powerful tentacles. He grits his teeth and tries to break free as the creature squeezes harder. The scene flashes back, and we see a young Tendo encouraging his brother to hit a beehive. But little 7-year-old Reiji was too scared and said he couldn't do it. With that, the other boys push him to the ground and call him a coward for not having the guts. Then, they start laughing and call him a crybaby, until something hits them in the face. Little Tendo appears and asks if they have the nerve to touch his little brother. With a confident smile, the older brother gets ready to defend the younger one. The bullies are confused and smell something sweet as they wipe their faces. Tendo then reveals he threw honey on them and runs off to make his plan work. He hits the beehive with a branch, and the bullies are surrounded by a swarm of bees. To their terror, a giant bee appears, ready to attack the boys. The bullies scream in desperation and start running away from the furious swarm. They flee, yelling at Tendo for having caused all that trouble with the bees. Little Reiji looks at his older brother with a look of pure admiration and respect. Tendo then turns to him and promises he will protect him no matter what. The younger boy is speechless and just stares at his hero with shining eyes. And Reiji remembers that back then, his brother's back was dazzling to him. Back in the present, the raider continues to fight with all his might against the monster. Suddenly, the Black Knight's tail splits into several parts for a surprise attack, and with that, the white-haired boy is hit head-on by a devastating blow. His eye glows intensely, and a magic circle forms, showcasing his ability. He then uses his power to stop the Black Knight's tentacles in mid-air. But even so, he is hit hard and thrown far away by the impact. The genius grumbles that he didn't want to rely on the eye of chronostasis, but has no other choice. The interface shows his life counter and warns that his right arm is healing. With that, his lifespan drops from 153 to 150, 2 years. He thinks a fatal blow would cost over 100 years of life to fully heal. The white-haired boy realizes the monster's core will break with one more attack, but he admits that landing this blow will be difficult because the creature is very fast. The raider defends himself from one of the tentacles, using his arm as a sort of shield. With a determined look, he prepares to continue the fight despite the disadvantage. The hero dodges another swift attack from the Black Knight with great agility. His red eye glows intensely as he analyzes the enemy's movements. Then he reveals he managed to freeze 6 of the tentacles using the Eye of Chronostasis. The genius concludes that this means there is only one tentacle left for him to worry about, and the Black Knight prepares to attack with the last tentacle it can still move. He knows the chance to win will only last for an instant, and he can't miss. With all the other tentacles frozen, he prepares for the final attack on the creature. The monster's core is completely exposed and on the verge of shattering completely. And with a battle cry, the white-haired boy charges forward to end the fight. A flashback of Tendo begins, and he laments how weak he was in the past. He remembers the day the labyrinth appeared, and he saw that monstrous shadow. The red-haired boy blames himself for letting his family perish on that terrible day, and he was the only one who got to continue living in peace after the whole tragedy. The boy feels pathetic for always being protected by others instead of fighting. Reiji then remembers that day and says that's why he became stronger. We see the young white-haired boy training tirelessly to overcome his weakness. He trained with his sword day and night, so he would never need help again. The boy sits exhausted on the ground, surrounded by several broken wooden targets. And all of this was so he would never need someone to protect him in a battle again. Back in the present, the raider faces his enemy with unwavering determination. The knight attacks with its last tentacle, but the genius was already expecting it, and the white-haired boy is hit squarely in the chest by the monster's attack. But he says that this time, he will be the one to protect someone important to him. Suddenly, a foot stomps hard on the ground, and someone emerges to help in the battle. The raider gives a small smile, seeing that his plan worked just as he expected. It turns out he used his power to freeze the last tentacle at the last second, and with the enemy completely paralyzed, he moves in for his finishing blow. The interface freezes on the Black Knight's core and notifies him about his arm's repair. Then a new message appears, confirming the arm repair is complete. With his arm healed, he grips the handle of his sword with all his strength. The white-haired boy charges with everything. He's got to deliver the final blow to the creature, and with a cry of rage, he says the monster's life is now his. But suddenly, something hits him from behind, and he is completely shocked. One of the knight's tails pierces him, and he doesn't understand how it happened. He remembers that the monster had a tentacle hidden under the ground, and that was the only one that wasn't frozen by his special power. With that, the blow hits him head on and brutally throws him far away. The raider looks up with pain and surprise on his wounded face. The attack severely wounds him, and he loses a lot of his red liquid. With that, the white-haired boy is thrown and falls to the ground, powerless. He lies there, wounded and unable to get up to continue the fight, but even in that state, he doesn't give up, and his eyes still glows with power. The interface warns that the creature cannot move, but visibility is low. Completely wounded, he tries to focus, but the injury gets in the way. He realizes the red liquid is blocking his vision and his power. The interface confirms that chronostasis is unavailable and his arms have been injured. Even so, he drags himself across the floor and tries to grab his sword to fight. The genius doesn't surrender and tells himself he hasn't finished his mission yet. But the system warns that a high temperature reaction has been detected in the enemy. The Black Knight prepares to fire an energy beam from its core. Lying on the ground, the raider just watches the scene, unable to do a thing. He laments, thinking he just wanted to become stronger to protect others. And he remembers the light he once saw on his older brother's back. With a tired look, he seems to accept his fate and the end of the battle. The hero remains on the ground, completely defeated and without any hope. But suddenly, his brother Tendo leaps into the air, ready to attack the monster. The white-haired boy is completely shocked to see his brother's action. With his sword in hand, the redhead prepares to strike the creature's core, and with a battle cry, he descends with all his might for the final blow. The image of his brave older brother from the past inspires the young man to fight. With a look full of fury, he refuses to be a coward again. Lying on the ground, the younger brother watches the scene, not believing what he's seeing. He thinks that if he runs away again, he'll never be able to move on. So he charges forward with his sword to attack the Black Knight with everything he's got. The redhead yells that if he fails now, he'll never be able to face the future. The creature remains frozen by the genius's power and is unable to defend itself. But the monster's core glows intensely and prepares to fire, and a powerful energy beam is fired toward the red-haired boy. Tendo is shocked to see the attack coming at him with no chance to dodge. Even with the beam coming his way, the boy doesn't give up and attacks with his sword. The knight's attack is so powerful that it creates a massive explosion of purple energy. The redhead realizes he can't dodge in time and braces for the worst. With wide eyes, he faces the attack that's about to hit him head on. But suddenly, Rigi throws himself in front of him to block the beam with his own body. Tendo watches in shock as his younger brother sacrifices himself to save him. He looks at his sword and realizes the blade shattered from the impact of the attack. In an instant, he understands the weapon would have broken if he had tried to block the beam. The Black Knight's attack throws both brothers far away with great force. The redhead falls to the ground and wonders what that was, as the monster can do anything. With a determined look, he prepares to continue the fight against the enemy. Suddenly, his left eye begins to glow with a very intense pink light. The knight prepares to fire another beam, and Tendo wonders if this is the end. He looks to the side and sees his brother falling from the sky, completely wounded. The redhead catches him in his arms, just in time to prevent him from getting hurt more. With tears in his eyes, he desperately screams his younger brother's name. He holds him tightly while the Black Knight just watches the scene from a distance. Tendo is speechless when he sees the massive wound on his brother's chest. The genius is severely injured, and it looks like he won't survive the attack. The redhead holds him tightly and asks if his younger brother can hear him. The interface shows that Reiji's lifespan is dropping from 57 years. The counter keeps decreasing, and Tendo screams for his brother not to pass on there. But with his last bit of strength, the white-haired boy says it's not over yet. He says he doesn't accept what his older brother has become in recent years, and he remembers when they were kids, and Tendo would drag him around without a care in the world. But he laments that since that day, the redhead fell apart and went his own way. With a cry of rage, Rigi says he will never accept that version of his brother. Tendo is completely shocked to hear his younger brother's harsh words. He just stares at his relative, not knowing what to say or how to react to the situation. The genius then asks him to move forward and to keep on walking without stopping. The red-haired boy listens to his brother's words with a heavy heart. Raiji tells him to keep walking until the very last second of his life. With tears in his eyes, Tendo lowers his head and understands what he means. The white-haired boy remembers that in the old days, he only looked forward. The redhead's eyes fill with tears as he hears his brother's last words. Raiji says that no matter what happened, he would always laugh like a fool, and in the end, he always managed to snatch victory from anyone's hands. Tendo starts to cry as he remembers who he used to be in the past. Suddenly, his left eye begins to glow with an intense red light. He puts his hand to his face and wonders what this is, because his eye is burning. Then the system interface announces that the transfer of the Regulus weapon has begun. The red-haired boy can't believe what he's seeing and wonders what that powerful weapon is. With his last bit of strength, Reiji says that if it's for the power to win, he can have it. His red eye shines one last time as the power is transferred to his older brother. Tendo becomes desperate as he feels the power entering his body nonstop. The transfer bar keeps rising and has already reached 17%. With tears in his eyes, the redhead screams for his brother to stop this madness. But the genius says that no matter how much he regrets the past, the transfer continues and is now at 52%. The red-haired boy screams his younger brother's name, begging him to stop. Raiji says that no matter how unfair the world is, he cannot lose. The younger brother gives one last smile, and the redhead holds him tightly in his arms. And with his last words, he says that Tendo is his older brother and his hero. With that, the light in Reiji's eye fades, and he finally closes his eyes. The interface confirms the transfer is complete, and the power now belongs to Tendo. He stands up and faces the Black Knight with a look of pure rage and vengeance. The creature prepares to attack with its sharp claws and a golden aura. The monster fires another energy beam, but the redhead is ready to fight back. The creature stares at him with its purple eyes and a very confident expression, but the red-haired boy is not intimidated and prepares for the final battle. His brother's body begins to turn into sand and slowly disappear. Then the system reveals that Regulus weapon number 1 has the chronostasis code. Mizusaki wakes up and realizes she passed out during the fight against the Black Knight. She groans in pain and tries to get up to see what's happening in the hall. With a hand on her head, she realizes the battle isn't over yet and despairs. She gets up and is shocked by the scene she sees in the middle of the hall. The officer sees Captain Mogami's body dissolving and the knight still standing. She also sees the captain's older brother ready to fight the monster. The blue-haired girl is speechless and doesn't understand anything that has happened. She runs toward them and screams the captain's name with tears in her eyes. Completely shocked, she can't believe her captain has been defeated. But suddenly, Tendo's sword flies and stops right in front of the Black Knight. The sword floats in the air, and the monster can no longer move. With the sword stuck in the ground, the knight is completely paralyzed. And to the girl's amazement, the monster's core begins to crack and break. Tendo remembers that whenever his brother attacked, he would make time start moving again, and that objects frozen in time don't break until time resumes. With this, the redhead concludes that no matter how strong the enemy is, it won't be invincible if it has a weak point that can be exploited. And with a cry of rage, Tendo attacks the Black Knight's core with all his strength. With his eye glowing red, the redhead yells that the monster's playtime is over. He then faces the creature up close and says its time has come to an end. And with the eye of chronostasis activated, he prepares for the final blow on the creature. The red-haired boy shoves what's left of his sword into the enemy's core. With this impact, the Black Knight's core shatters into 1,000 pieces. A blue energy explodes from within the monster, throwing it back with force. The explosion is so strong that the creature's armor begins to disintegrate, and the Black Knight is completely consumed by a pillar of light and energy. Meanwhile, the younger brother's body continues to dissolve into particles. In a few seconds, nothing is left of the genius but glowing dust. In the sky, what's left of the monster floats in the air before disappearing completely. Tendo looks up, shocked by the final result of the battle. He looks at his hand and feels the power he inherited from his younger brother. But suddenly, the boy lets out a cry of pain, feeling the power in his body. A new wave of energy throws him back with overwhelming force. The creature then stares down at him with a very threatening look. With that, an intense white light shines from the Black Knight's chest. The red-haired boy is caught by surprise and thrown by the monster's final explosion. He falls to his knees on the ground, completely exhausted and with no strength to fight. The explosion destroys everything around and kicks up a cloud of dust in the hall. The place falls silent, and only the sound of energy echoes through the area. Tendo looks ahead and realizes that it's finally, truly over. At that moment, his eye stops glowing and returns to its normal color. He then gets up and runs desperately, shouting his brother's name. With a face full of despair, the boy keeps shouting Raiji's name, but he knows his brother won't answer because he is gone forever. The hero stops and looks at the ground, where his relative dissolved into particles. He stands there, not knowing what to do or how to react to that sad scene. With a lost look, he can't believe his brother sacrificed himself for him. And overcome with grief, the red-haired boy falls to his knees and cries. With his face bathed in tears, he screams his younger brother's name nonstop. Kneeling on the ground, he sadly holds what's left of his broken sword. From a distance, the blue-haired officer watches the scene, not knowing what to do or say. Suddenly, a purple light flashes, and he has a terrible vision in his mind. He remembers the moment his brother was hit by the monster's attack. The image of his relative's severe wound leaves him completely terrified. With his eyes wide with horror, the boy screams his brother's name in despair. But then the redhead wakes up in his bed and realizes it was all a horrible nightmare. He looks around and sees he's in his room, which looks quite normal and tidy. Through the window, he sees the sunlight and the city buildings. Like any other day, out of breath, the boy tries to understand what happened, and if it was all just a dream. His eyes then focus on the clock, marking the time on the nightstand. Still confused, the boy goes to take a shower to try and get his thoughts in order. With the water running, he leans his hand on the wall and tries to calm down. With a tired look, he thinks that in the end, it was all just a bad dream. But suddenly, the system interface appears on his hand and startles him. The screen shows that his life expectancy is now 35 years. With that, he realizes it wasn't a dream and that the transfer was real. After his shower, he remembers a conversation he had with his younger brother. Raiji said he would be late that night because he had an important mission. Tendo then calls out to him and offers to pack a lunch for him to take. He hands him the bag, but his brother says he doesn't need to worry about it. The redhead insists, saying he packed all the things his relative liked the most. With a serious look, the genius ends up accepting his older brother's gift. He takes the bag and gets ready to leave on his last mission as a raider. Before leaving, the white-haired boy says he's leaving, and the redhead tells him to be careful. Back in the present, Tendo realizes that was the last time he saw his brother. With a heavy heart, he understands that his younger brother is truly gone. The boy spins around quickly with a look of pure panic and denial on his face. In disbelief, he runs toward the door, as if he could change what happened. Desperate, he runs down the hall of the house, shouting his younger brother's name. But when he opens the door, he comes face to face with Mizusaki, his relative's subordinate. The redhead is completely shocked and asks what she is doing there at his house. With a serious look, the blue-haired girl stares at him without saying a single word. He doesn't understand the situation at all and stands frozen at the door, not knowing how to react. Suddenly, the officer turns bright red and seems quite embarrassed by the scene. The scene changes, and we see the boy has prepared an omelette for her at the kitchen table. Still blushing, the girl tries to explain herself, but can't find the right words. She says she's going to eat, and the redhead finds the way she talks so fast amusing. With that, the subordinate picks up her spoon and tries a piece of the food he made. The red-haired boy watches her and notices the organization's emblem on her uniform. A flashback begins 8 hours earlier, right after they escape the labyrinth. Several soldiers surround Tendo on the ground and confirm the capture of the sole survivor, But the other raiders are shocked when they realize the redhead has the eye of chronostasis. One of the officers notices the emblem and wonders if he's connected to the organization. They then accuse the boy of taking Captain Mogami and yell for him to stop. At that moment, Mizusaki appears and reveals that he is the captain's older brother. But one of the soldiers doesn't care and brutally steps on the boy's head. Angrily, the officer yells, saying she won't allow them to treat him that way. A man says it's orders, but she takes full responsibility for the situation. Another raider asks about the captain, and the blue-haired girl gets very annoyed. With a pained expression, she remembers her superior's sacrifice in the battle. She then shows what's left of the uniform and says there is no captain anymore. The other soldiers fall completely silent, shocked by the terrible news. Even so, one of the raiders tries to restrain the red-haired boy on the ground by force. The officer tells them to take him home and that it's the most they can do for him. Back in the present, Mizusaki finishes her meal and thanks him for the food. She is surprised by his talent and asks if he always cooks at home. The redhead replies that his brother was busy, so he got used to the kitchen. The blue-haired girl listens to the explanation with a thoughtful and slightly sad look. On the kitchen table, a photo of the two smiling brothers shows how happy they were. The blue-haired girl closes her eyes for a moment, looking very sad about the situation. Then she introduces herself as Yui Mizusaki from the Labyrinth Operations Unit. The redhead hears the introduction and repeats the organization's name, not understanding a thing. With that, the officer asks if he has at least heard of that name before. She explains that it's a government agency that oversees the national raiders, and with a smile, the girl says they are the heroes who protect the people. The red-haired boy stares at her in silence, processing all the information, but he says that she herself doesn't believe those words about heroes. Mizusaki admits that his instincts are sharp despite his goofy appearance. The redhead replies that for a government organization, she has a lot of nerve. The subordinate says the place doesn't run on ideals alone, but there was one exception. With a serious look, she reveals that among them, there was a real, true hero, and that hero was Captain Mogami, the strongest and most exceptional raider in the country. The boy listens attentively, as the officer says he will be the center of everything. She then looks at him and says his name is Mogami Tendo, and he is shocked. Confused, the boy asks why he would be the center of all this mess. The girl points to his left eye and reveals the secret behind the power, and says that the Eye of Chronostasis is not a common weapon like the others that exist. It is a Regulus weapon so powerful it could shake an entire nation on its own. She explains that he inherited that power from his brother in exchange for his life. The boy's red eye widens as he understands the truth about the sacrifice. He laughs nervously and says this must all be a big, bad joke. Then he remembers the scene of his brother's passing and blames himself for being alive. With anger and frustration, the redhead clenches his fist tightly on the table. The blue-haired officer watches his reaction in silence for a moment. Then she says she has one more very important thing to tell him, and reveals that the humanoid enemy from the labyrinth is likely still alive. Tendo is shocked and says he thought they had defeated the monster in there. But the officer explains that his life expectancy didn't increase after the fight. The system interface appears and confirms he still has 35 years. The boy looks at his own hand and realizes his brother's sacrifice was in vain. With a cry of rage, he slams his fist on the table and lowers his head in frustration. He curses the situation while the blue-haired girl just watches him in silence. With all this in mind, she asks if he wants to become a national raider. The red-haired boy is startled by the proposal and says it's a joke. Mizusaki explains that this way, he'll be able to enter the labyrinths to fight. The redhead remains silent, and his red eye shines with a new determination. The officer says that next time, he'll be able to avenge his younger brother. With his head down and teeth clenched, he seems to consider her offer, but he feels useless and says he's just the shadow of his genius brother. With clenched teeth, the boy shows a new determination in his eyes, and he remembers his brother's last words for him, to keep moving forward. His red eye shines intensely with the memory of that final moment. Rigi yelled at him not to stop, and to keep moving forward without giving up. The genius told him to keep walking until the very last second of his life. He understands that his relative entrusted that power and his dream to him, and with his last ounce of strength, the white-haired boy asked him to never lose. With that, the redhead gives a small smile and seems to have made his decision. He takes a deep breath and prepares to give his answer to the officer in front of him. The red-haired boy looks at the window and thoughtfully stares at the daylight. He then remembers that his younger brother saw him as his great hero. The genius always considered him his older brother and an inspiration to him. With teary eyes, Tendo decides he can't let his relative down. He then thinks that he can't betray his younger brother's feelings, and with determination, he says he will become a national raider to honor him. The redhead says he will do everything his brother would have done if he were still alive, and he promises to live in a way that his relative can be proud of him in the end. The blue-haired officer stares at him in silence and seems satisfied with his answer. With a small smile, she says that's fine, and that there is a first step. To the boy's surprise, she puts handcuffs on his wrists without any warning. With a mischievous smile, the girl says the first step is to arrest him. The redhead is completely speechless and says she must be kidding. The scene changes, and we see a black car driving at high speed on the road. Inside the vehicle are Tendo, the officer, and a man with glasses at the wheel. The red-haired boy says he won't run and asks them to take off the handcuffs. He shows his hands and begs them to release him, because it's very uncomfortable. The blue-haired girl looks at him with a serious, expressionless face. But she says it's a necessary procedure, and he needs to endure it. The redhead asks where they are taking him, and she reveals it's to HQ. She says he was already scheduled to be taken in for questioning. He then realizes he was tricked, and that it was all part of her plan. Annoyed, the boy says she had no right to refuse his answer. Suddenly, the driver chimes in and says he's mistaken. The man reveals that the rule is to take any bearer of a regulus weapon by force, and he says it would be normal to use full body restraints and secure transport. The driver explains that his treatment was only easy because of Mizuzaki, and says he's only getting special treatment because he's Captain Mogami's brother. But the officer tells the driver to stop and says it was just more convenient. With that, the man with glasses apologizes for his rude behavior. The redhead and the officer remain silent for a moment inside the moving car, but the boy tells her not to worry because that's just how things are. Suddenly, an emergency alert sounds, and the driver announces a problem. The car radio confirms that an emergency situation has just occurred. With that, Tendo's eyes widen, not understanding what is happening. The alert warns that enemies have emerged from the fourth labyrinth at the Nerima base. Mizusaki comments on the terrible timing for this to happen right now. Then she orders the driver to head to the base, because there is no other choice. The car makes a sharp turn at high speed, and the red-haired boy screams in surprise. Because of the maneuver, he is thrown from side to side in the back seat. The blue-haired officer yells at him and tells him to put his seatbelt on properly. The boy asks what the heck is going on, and if that's the abandoned zone. She explains that after a while, the labyrinths start releasing monsters. The redhead then realizes that with them gone, only rookie raiders are left at the base. He complains about the security, and Mizusaki says they are short-staffed. With a determined look, they both know they need to hurry, or it will be too late. The scene shows a giant wall with a huge hole in the middle of the structure, and several insect-like monsters pour out of the hole non-stop. One of the creatures fires a yellow energy beam from its sharp head. Then, several monsters begin to attack the buildings and the surrounding city. Some investigators try to fight back with their firearms. One of them shouts that they won't last much longer and need reinforcements. But the monsters are too fast and easily defeat the soldiers. One of the creatures attacks an investigator and defeats him with a single blow. At that moment, the black car arrives at the battle scene at high speed. The red-haired boy looks out the window and sees the city's destruction. He then realizes that this is the Nerima evacuation zone he had heard about. The driver slams on the brakes and stops right in the middle of the destroyed street. With a firm step, the blue-haired officer gets out of the vehicle. She exits the car and stares at the scene of destruction with a very serious look. The base walls have been completely destroyed, and the situation is critical. With that, the girl grabs a pair of binoculars to get a better look at the situation from a distance. She sees the few remaining soldiers being surrounded by dozens of monsters. Worried, she realizes the enemies are going to escape the evacuation zone. The officer then turns to Tendo, who is still handcuffed inside the car. The boy asks if the situation is really as under control as it seems. She explains that the residents were evacuated 10 years ago, and there are no civilians, but the redhead says they need help and offers to fight alongside them. Mizusaki refuses his help, saying he is still a civilian and must go to a safe place, and she warns him that if he uses the Regulus weapon, the organization will punish him without a second thought. The red-haired boy is surprised and stares at the woman, not understanding the warning. She then explains that unlike last time, they are outside the labyrinth now. Therefore, the officer warns that they won't be able to cover up his use of the power. Suddenly, the girl grabs him by the shoulder with one hand and a weapon in the other. With a serious look, she asks if he hasn't forgotten about those rules, and reminds him that the Eye of Chronostasis is a high-risk weapon that burns his life. The redhead clenches his fists in anger as the agent continues to stare at him seriously. She then turns around and tells the driver she'll leave the rest to him. The man with glasses confirms, and the boy shouts for the blue-haired girl to wait. With that, the officer activates a type of glowing blue energy sword in her hand, and she runs at high speed toward the monsters to start the battle. She jumps very high and launches a powerful energy attack against the creatures. From inside the car, the hero watches the scene, shocked by the girl's strength. He then wonders what kind of absurd jumping power she just used. Her blue energy moves through the air like a whip toward the enemies. The driver brakes sharply, and the red-haired boy is thrown to the side. Angrily, the man shouts for him to know his place, because he's just an amateur. Even lying on the seat, the redhead glares at the driver with a defiant look. Then he falls silent and stares at the man with his two colored eyes. The hero thinks that he's not like Raiji, and that nobody knows the better than him. With a serious face, he continues to stare at the driver with determination. But even so, he seems to have made a decision about what to do. His red eye glows intensely, showing he's not going to stand by and do nothing. Suddenly, the boy sees a purple monster about to attack the blue-haired girl. An energy shield shatters, and the officer falls to the ground, completely shocked. With a hand to her mouth, the agent looks up with a look of pure terror. The humanoid creature stares at her up close, ready to deliver the final blow. At that moment, the redhead opens the car door and throws himself out of the vehicle. He rolls on the asphalt and manages to brace himself on the ground to avoid getting too hurt. The driver is furious and yells, asking what the heck he thinks he's doing. Lying on the ground, the hero gets up and prepares to run into the fight. The man yells for him to come back, because if he goes there, he will definitely be done for. But the boy ignores him and runs, wondering if he can really do this. His eye glows, and he says he's already made up his mind, and he won't lose anyone else. The red-haired kid runs through the totally wrecked street to try and save the woman on the ground. Then the boy's face shows pure despair as he spots the intense danger right in front of him. The bizarre creature raises its sharp claw, getting ready to deliver the final strike to the poor girl. Even with his hands cuffed, the hero gathers an absurd amount of courage and decides he needs to do something. With that, he does not think twice and ends up activating the power of his mysterious, glowing magical eye. Instantly, the beast freezes in mid-air, surrounded by a strange, bright golden aura. And with a jump, the guy gets close to the giant frozen claw, wanting to know if the girl is okay. But soon the boy widens his eyes and lets out a shocked yell, realizing he made a huge mistake. It turns out the poor police officer also ended up completely frozen by the special ability. He even tries to pull her body, but soon figures out that stop time locks everything firmly in place. Then the boy stares at the paralyzed creature and wonders if he can unfreeze just the officer. At that moment, he notices something around him and seems to have a great idea to fix this. The hero focuses his attention on a large protective trash net that was thrown on the street. He then gets close to the dumpster next to the frozen monster, planning to use that to his advantage. With a serious look, the boy tells himself that this material is going to be very useful right now. He then stretches his arms and tightly grabs the heavy green net even with his hands cuffed. Using all his strength, the redhead throws the massive tactical mesh right over the bizarre creature. At that exact moment, he double activates his ocular power, making his eyes shine even brighter, and so the large tarp falls, perfectly covering the body of the enemy that remains frozen in the air. The young man looks at the trap and figures that this thing will definitely hold back the beast's strikes. But the plan is not over yet, and he anxiously searches for a specific item on the stone floor. Super fast, he spots the handle of the agent's awesome weapon lying on the asphalt just a few feet away. He picks up the gear, fatally remembering that this was the same accessory a coworker used. Without wasting much time, the savior positions his finger and presses the device's power button. Right away, a large green energy blade sprouts from the hilt, giving the guy a massive scare. The redhead then stares at the light sword, and all while figuring out how the weapon works. With that, he takes a firm combat stance over his frozen partner, getting ready for the fight. The young man then concentrates hard and partially releases his ultimate time gift. Immediately, the beast starts moving again, breaking through all that protective net in just a few seconds. At that point, the girl also goes back to her normal state, getting very confused about the freed prisoner. The warrior lets out a light sigh of relief upon noticing that everyone went back to moving together. The officer widens her eyes, seeing her sword being taken while the boy asks to borrow it. Next, the guy focuses a deadly stare, putting all his attention straight on the bizarre monster. The strange beast does not back down and starts charging a dangerous red energy ball in its mouth. But the young man acts much faster and brings down a heavy, strong vertical strike with his light blade. In this tense moment, the prodigy fully unleashes his special ability right on top of the light. And then the bizarre white creature takes a massive impact, generating a very strong explosion. The power of the strike is so insane that it tears through the middle of the armored body without much trouble. The brave kid grits his teeth and puts all his body weight into finishing the decisive cut. Finally, the giant creature loses its strength and collapses, entirely defeated, onto the stone floor. A blue screen then pops up over the asphalt, confirming that the big enemy has been destroyed, and the luminous panel soon reveals that the fighter ended up gaining a lot of lifetime as a reward. The boy happily celebrates the victory while the woman on the ground asks, totally intrigued, who he is. Then she focuses her sight on the sword and soon notices those heavy handcuffs, keeping him bound there. The officer shows huge shock, seeing that he was trapped like that this whole time. The young man notices the problem and waves his hands in despair, swearing he is innocent of all this. But the boss takes a serious stance, warning that she is going to lock the guy up for using the forbidden blade. Out of nowhere, a scream warns that the defense was broken, leaving our main character pretty scared. In the distance, we see a giant group of monsters running super fast, straight into the city. The redhead grits his teeth with a terrified face, realizing the monsters are heading his way. The hero thinks things are going to get really bad if the creatures escape that isolated city zone. Then we see a giant creature jumping in to cowardly attack a normal couple on the ground, and with an annoyed look, the redhead clicks his tongue, showing a face full of anger at the whole mess. He then runs in determined with the glowing sword, swearing he will manage to stop all of them soon. While pushing forward, the boy tries to focus and remember the bizarre feeling of his last attack. At that moment, he completely focuses his mind and activates the power of his mysterious magical eye. Right away, the ability works, trapping one of the bizarre monsters in a golden ring of light. Without wasting time, the kid uses a double magic trick, managing to freeze another loose enemy in the air. Soon he multiplies his power, freezing 5 beasts at once while sliding right underneath them. The warrior cracks a very confident smile, realizing his highly risky plan actually worked out. Now the street is full of ugly threats completely frozen in time, forming a neat little line. But suddenly, the blue-haired officer runs toward him, yelling the boy's name. The woman shouts, telling him to extend the weapon, but the kid is left not understanding absolutely anything. With that, the investigator herself jumps, landing a very powerful strike right on an ugly creature. Then she calls out from afar that she was talking about the glowing gear that was in the boy's hands. The woman tells him to turn the button on the hilt, and the boy stares at the sword's handle in confusion. Super fast, our hero uses his thumb to press a tiny switch on the awesome weapon. Immediately, the green blade grows in an absurd way, giving our guy a huge scare. The redhead finally understands that her warning was to increase the size of his light sword. The officer yells, telling the guy not to get distracted in the clash and to strike all the targets at once. Getting the message, the brave kid plants his feet on the asphalt, getting ready for the final swing. Letting out a huge battle cry, he swings that giant blade with all the strength he has. His battle partner watches the scene, rooting hard for him to sweep the enemies off the entire street. The insane attack cuts through the whole street, hitting the beasts, and even the light poles around them. The destructive light hits the paralyzed bodies, causing a bizarre impact on those monsters. At that exact second, he deactivates the time power, releasing all the beasts from their frozen state. And just like that, the sword's energy violently crushes the creatures before they can even react. The genius strategy of pausing and releasing the power right at the moment of the strike worked out perfectly in the end. The young fighter shows a focused look, knowing exactly what he was doing in that clash. Finally, the pieces of the targets fall to the asphalt, proving the threat was eliminated for good. The boy smiles in relief, admiring the absurd capability of his newly stolen ocular ability. He instantly realizes this magical power can be used in several different ways in a fight. With the tense clash over, the sword turns off, and he reaches to grab the hilt from the creature's remains. However, the young man gets a massive scare when he hears heavy footsteps coming from right behind him. The agent gets close with a very intimidating aura, demanding some explanations for the disobedience. Shaking with fear, the redhead tries to force an awkward smile to try and calm the angry woman down, but she yells in the kid's face, questioning the madness of stacking so many spells in a single strike. Just then, a panel pops up revealing that the boy lost a lot of life expectancy doing that. The hero goes into total panic, not understanding how he ended up losing so much time just like that. The officer sighs, explaining that activating the eye several times in a fight drains life really fast. Doing the math, the warrior realizes in shock that he burned away thousands of days for absolutely nothing. To try and defend himself, he yells, saying that at least he helped take down all the targets. But his expression drops hard when he notices those weak monsters barely gave back any days of life. Completely devastated, the boy crouches down, holding his own head and whining in pure sadness. Out of nowhere, the woman's sharp blade is pointed straight at our young main character's neck. The redhead raises his cuffed hands, completely confused by this sudden threat coming from the girl. The fighter stares at his partner's back, noticing the tense vibe hanging in the air once again. She then turns her face, calmly admitting that his absurd stubbornness actually saved the whole situation. And with a very deep look, the investigator warns that if he wants to keep fighting on the team, the boy is going to have to be truly prepared, facing the huge destroyed wall of the base. But suddenly, a very bizarre beast stands on top of a pole, letting out a wild roar. With that, the creature starts releasing a very intense black energy, completely changing its shape. The blue-haired officer stares at the beast very seriously, warning that the real threat was right there. Then the boy starts breaking a cold sweat, feeling all that purple, magical pressure in the air around him. The hero notices in shock that the enemy turned into some sort of giant, terrifying bat. Then the beast focuses on the humans down below, using its large, very red and glowing eyes. Soon, some armed investigators arrive on the scene, pointing in shock at the creature on the pole. The soldiers step back in fear, noticing that the ugly monster evolved right in front of everyone. Super fast, one of the guards raises his heavy rifle, trying to aim at the flying creature high up there. But the investigator takes a very quick jump with her sword in hand, telling the guy to wait. The soldier does not listen at all and fires a strong burst of golden light straight at the upper target. With that, the shots forcefully hit the monster's dark wing without causing any real damage to it. Then the flying beast lowers its face, finding the guy's attack attempt to be a total annoyance. At that moment, the redhead is left open-jawed, noticing something super weird about that ugly monster. The boy then steps forward in shock as he realizes that the bizarre creature actually knows how to speak. Instantly, the dark bat spreads its massive wings and jumps from the pole, heading straight for the street. During the fall, the monster throws several dark spikes from its own body in an insane attack. The young fighter widens his eyes, staring at the rain of thorns falling right in his direction. The spikes tear through the wind at an absurd speed, falling to annihilate the guys down below. One of the strikes hits the asphalt with brutal force, right in front of the distracted shooter. The soldier drops to his knees, giving a confident smile, laughing at the flying beast's really bad aim. But the spear stuck in the ground starts glowing in a red tone, showing an absurd danger. Soon the spike explodes in an intense way, blasting the guard and the red-haired boy into the air on the spot. Despite the heavy hit, the hero gets up, running toward the smoke while yelling in pure worry. He drops to his knees next to the soldier lying on the asphalt, telling him to push through the pain. The guard is very hurt, and suddenly the boy notices a target of light focusing on his body. With that, a virtual panel shows the young man's own life countdown dropping very fast. The warrior ignores the risk, telling his coworker that he still has plenty of life left to help. With a tense look, the boy focuses completely, hearing the bizarre beast praising his stubbornness. The large bat stares at the crew, declaring in an evil way that weak bugs must meet their end. Next, the beast dives, tearing through the sky, dropping even more spikes on the street below. The redhead gets furious, refusing to accept defeat, and activates his glowing eye magic right then and there. And with the power turned on, all those bizarre spears are instantly frozen in time before falling. The evil bat seems quite confused, realizing its dirty move stopped out of nowhere in mid-air. Taking advantage of the pause, the young guy grabs the injured guard's arm, wanting to know if he can walk. He then carries his hurt coworker, running away from danger toward the safe building. The beast keeps flying high, muttering angrily to try and figure out that time trick. Out of nowhere, the woman arrives, attacking by surprise, and going all out toward the distracted monster. She gathers a lot of blue lightning around her own body to give the sword's blade an extra boost. The dark bat turns its face, noticing the armed woman's insane aura getting very close. With an awesome spin, the officer lands a very fast electric attack on the sinister beast's back. The agent finishes the jump, safely falling through the air while the target takes all the heavy damage from the cut. But the investigator hits the ground, showing a huge shock mixed with a face of frustration. The girl notices that the light weapon cut the giant wing in a very shallow and completely useless way. The warrior says the creature easily dodged, and soon we see the bizarre beast already striking back. On pure reflex, the officer creates a barrier of lightning to block the monster's brutal flying charge. The mid-air collision is very heavy, pushing the girl straight to the ground along with all that light. The flying bat yells in anger that the weapons are trash, wanting to pierce the defenseless girl. Even while falling toward the asphalt, the brave woman spins the sword, trying for one more quick defense. With that, she unleashes an insane mid-air slash, creating a giant circle of lightning to save herself just fine. The agent widens her eyes and shows a tremendous shock, realizing how ugly the situation has become. Then the woman lands on the building, noticing the creature flew really high and escaped the attack range. So, she stabs her sword into the window of that large building to try and brace herself during the fall. The dark monster stares at the crew with its large, glowing red and terrifying eyes. While hanging there, the girl thinks of a way to creatively counter the beast's strike, but she notices that the enemy's absurd height is a giant problem for them at that moment. Down below, the hero hides behind a wall, protecting the wounded guard from the attacks from above. Then the woman takes a fast leap and lands safely right next to the boy on the broken asphalt. With that, the officer tells the young man to quickly release the time, freezing magic he had activated. The warrior shouts, giving firm orders for everyone to take up a defensive stance right away. Without delaying, the redhead turns off the power of his magical eye, blinking really hard right then. Immediately, all those black spikes drop hard, causing some pretty insane destruction. Meanwhile, two other guards raise their hands, creating awesome bright blue energy shields. The team leader also extends her glowing hand, preparing a massive magical defense on the asphalt. At that moment, a crystal on the girl's glove shines brightly, unleashing all of its power. Then a giant barrier pops up on the street, blocking out the entire violent and bizarre explosion of fire. Holding the shield, the commander orders the swift rescue of the unconscious ally in the middle of the chaos. The big dark bat continues floating in the sky, looking shocked by all that defense. But soon the beast gets very annoyed, finding those humans extremely bothersome to deal with there. The evil monster swears it will eliminate all those weak lives that are down below. Then the beast focuses its fierce gaze mostly on the blue-haired agent and our red-haired hero. The kid watches the guards rescue, while the woman takes a firm fighting stance. Commanding the crew, the officer shouts the name of one of the armed guards from her squad. She takes control, ordering the team to secure the area and clear out the rest of the wrecked street. Then the warrior calls the boy to sprint alongside her across the whole asphalt, but the redhead looks back and gets a massive scare from the surprise attack coming from the ugly monster. The flying bat shoots another absurd rain of sharp spikes right at the young man on the ground. Gritting his teeth, the fighter focuses his eyes, swearing he is going to stop that fatal attack. Without hesitation, he turns on the magic of his bizarre, glowing eye once again in all that mess. Instantly, all the sharp spears are completely locked in the air with a golden shine. The large flying demon gets spooked, seeing its attack stopped out of nowhere in a mysterious way. The flying beast grits its teeth, getting very mad at having its move blocked like that again. Floating in the sky, the monster stares at the kid, trying to figure out what crazy trick is going on down there. While running, the young guy seems quite confident for having blocked the beast's heavy strike. But out of nowhere, the monster roars and the spears start falling very fast again, scaring our guy. The hero panics, not understanding the mess going on, and tries to summon the light magic again. Seeing the kid's despair, the beast cracks a dark smile, thinking it has already won the fight. Then a virtual panel pops up, revealing that turning on the magic ability ended up going really wrong, and the screen warns that the dangerous creatures are completely out of his ocular powers range. The redhead widens his glowing eye, breaking a cold sweat and grasping the sad reality of the situation. The time magic actually has a very limited area of effect running along the city ground, and the great bat of darkness is flying way too high and outside that awesome power barrier. Looking up, the kid realizes he is not going to be able to reach the monster like that at all. He freezes in pure fear, noticing the deadly thorns are going to hit his body real soon. The boy grits his teeth in utter despair, trying to think of an urgent way to save himself. But right at that moment, the woman's heavy hand grabs the kid's shirt with a lot of force. The officer violently pulls his body backward, getting the boy out of that dangerous path. While they run away, she orders the young guy to shut off the eye spell right away, leaving him confused. The girl yells at the hero to stop throwing his valuable lifetime in the trash like that. The young man reacts with a guilty face, taking in the huge scolding from his highly skilled partner. With that, the boy rushes to deactivate the strong magic of his bizarre, blinking eye on the spot. Immediately, the large spikes hit the ground, causing a pretty insane explosion all over the street. Running from the fire, the redhead warns that the power does not reach the beast and suggests fleeing to the buildings. The agent tells him to keep running while the young man asks if she has any plan in mind. Looking up, the woman explains that hiding in a closed space would be a massive mistake. With the explosions going off, the hero goes into a crazy panic, asking what they should do. The officer smiles, saying they are going to lure the monster away, since its evolution was intense. Hearing the woman, the fighter widens his eyes in shock when he hears that word, evolution. Watching them run through the fully broken street, the winged beast mutters, finding that quite curious. The evil bat laughs, saying the two were pretty smart to run away like bugs. Then the cruel villain starts wrecking the surrounding buildings without showing a single drop of pity. During the escape, the woman explains that the enemies get much stronger with each new victory. She says that after that, these ugly beasts manage to evolve in a very dangerous way. The kid listens nervously upon learning that the stronger monsters gain entirely new abilities. Looking back, the woman states with total certainty that the bat is a level 2 enemy. Flying easily in the sky, the massive black creature keeps laughing at the humans running below. The strange beast thanks the officer for the lesson, pretending to be very touched by her words. The investigator glares at the threat with hatred, while the flying creature decides to crack a joke. With a bizarre look, the beast orders the duo to surrender right away if they do not want to perish. The monster dives, cutting through the air, swearing to crush them both without any mercy or pity. The boy shakes with fear hearing the demon promise a massive despair because they are just worms. But the evil beast gives a smile, laughing and repeating the word it just heard from the officer. The woman replies, mocking the creature's intelligence, and says its evolution was total garbage. The hero gets startled by his coworker's audacity, while she flashes a smile, taunting even more. She states with total confidence that the beast flying there is nothing but a huge piece of industrial trash. Seeing this, the redhead breaks a cold sweat, realizing the officer is calling the monster out to fight on purpose. The giant monster goes blind with rage, not liking being called trash after having evolved. Losing its temper, the demon roars, calling the girl every name in the book, and attacking in a violent way. A very large spike falls from the sky, and the boy yells, warning that their plan went wrong, but that the commander does not care at all and raises a really awesome blue shield right in front of her. Instantly, the large black thorn hits the barrier, causing a giant explosion on the asphalt. The impact is so absurd that it spreads a violent fire across all the completely destroyed asphalt. Pushing through the attack, the girl keeps running, telling the boy to go hide in a corner over there. The area around them is pure chaos, with lots of signs and concrete chunks fallen on the street. The warrior jumps across the stone blocks, holding her energy weapon with a lot of agility. At that moment, the flying beast swoops down super close like a very bizarre and fast shadow across the gray sky. The dark creature focuses its red gaze on its targets, seeming to have figured out the whole trick. The boy and the police officer finally get a break, staying protected inside those ruins. The agent announces she is going to act as bait for the monster, telling the kid to run away fast, and with a very focused and serious look, the girl gets ready to kick off her somewhat crazy plan right there. But the redhead pulls the officer in desperation, telling her right to her face that she will not make it if she tries. The investigator looks at the boy dryly, asking if he is a little scared of the fight. But soon she turns her face, realizing it is normal for him to be terrified since he is just a regular kid. With that, the boy hears the woman say in a very sad tone that he cannot handle a real fight. The hero lifts his face in total shock, warning that she cannot beat the demon all by herself. Hearing this stuff, the woman widens her big blue eyes, being taken completely by surprise. The boy keeps talking, calling her by her name, and showing that he is a nervous wreck. In a very calm tone, the prodigy says he has an epic plan to take down that crazy bat. The girl loses her patience, saying he must be joking because he just joined the base today. Clasping his hands, the boy begs for her help while she crosses her arms, looking a bit annoyed. The redhead swears up and down they are not going to lose, leaving the woman shocked by his courage. He then mentions he trusts her a lot just because she is on the team of an awesome captain named Raiji. At that moment, a gray-haired guy with an eye patch pops into his mind, showing he is a really badass master. The officer is left open-jawed, unable to say a word upon hearing the cool boss's name. And with a huge, confident smile, the woman blurts out that the kid's smooth talk was actually pretty good. She then accepts the rookie's crazy idea, asking what she needs to do when the fight breaks out. The young guy flashes an excited smile, announcing that the big moment to start the real clash has arrived. Then a flashback plays where the woman was much younger, standing in a place full of monsters. The tense scene shows a weird purple monster completely defeated on the cold stone floor, and right next to it, another bizarre beast that looks like a huge beetle appears knocked out and lifeless on the asphalt. The young agent talks to her master about the real danger of beasts that evolve out of nowhere. At that moment, we see the badass captain holding a giant sword with an absurd aura. The stylish guy glances sideways and mentions he learned to predict moves with an old friend. The gray-haired man says that compared to his friend's craziness, reading the beast strikes ends up being easy. Back to the present, the speedy warrior charges ahead, tearing up the street and kicking up a lot of dust on the ground. And with a sharp look and a sly smile, the woman runs fully focused to show her skills in the fight. Up high, the dark creature notices the movement, thinking it is great that the prey finally came out of hiding. Instantly, the monster closes its massive wings and starts a terrifying dive toward the ruined street. The flying villain locks its aim on the blue-haired girl, mocking her useless attempt to try and run away. Without a second thought, the beast unleashes another cloud of dark spears, destroying everything in the air, but the woman does not shake at all and raises her hand, summoning a large shield of light to defend herself. The heavy, bizarre strikes crash into the magical barrier, causing an explosion of fire everywhere. While the girl holds back the heavy hit in the air, the redhead slides super fast right underneath her. The kid grits his teeth, feeling the heat and the flying rocks, while staying focused on his crazy sprint. Out of nowhere, one of the spears pierces the ground really hard, landing right next to the boy's foot. Soon the red spike detonates, creating an insane fire that throws the kid far into the air. The fighter takes serious damage, feeling a bizarre pain while his partner looks back in panic. The blast rips the ground apart, making the commander scream the boy's name, thinking things went totally south. But even limping, the redhead yells that he is fine and asks the woman to stick to the plan. Trusting him, the officer charges forward with a jump, while the young man endures the pain from that huge wound on his back. Trembling all over, the kid tries to get up, supporting himself with his hands, feeling his body burn like fire. The intense wound starts flashing bright red, while his mind beeps like crazy. A magical little screen pops up, warning about the absurd damage across his body, and that his life is dropping. Sweating cold, the warrior grits his teeth, groaning that he cannot find the strength to stand up. Watching the clash from above, the massive bat remarks full of itself that the fight was pretty boring. The beast smiles looking at the boy, discovering it was him who froze the dark spikes earlier. The monster mocks him, noticing the weakness of the time power, leaving the young guy annoyed by the talk. Realizing its advantage, the giant demon opens its claws, wanting to deal the final blow to the kid. The bat fires another crazy cloud of fast spikes, swearing to pierce the boy without any mercy. Without much choice, the young guy takes a breath and turns on the power of his bizarre, glowing eye one more time. With that, the first wave of dangerous spears freezes, getting trapped in those strong rings of light. But since the pause time is short, the other spikes fly right past, heading to hit him instantly. The hero pushes past his own limits, pulling a double charge, and manages to stop a few more spears. Several spikes crash into the ground, kicking up a lot of smoke, while the kid tries to make it out alive there. The beast lets out a loud laugh, laughing hard knowing the dirty rain of attacks is not going to stop. In desperation, the redhead jumps back, narrowly dodging a heavy rock falling right next to him. But the bizarre rain does not end, and an explosion goes off right on the kid's back, throwing him far. Flying in pain, the warrior grits his teeth, forcing yet another absolutely crazy triple magic layer. The spikes do not stop hitting the street, generating a firestorm that burns the hero badly. Totally out of gas, the young man falls sliding across the ground, hitting his head on the fallen blocks there. At that point, a red panel beeps very loudly, warning that the boy's leg also broke badly, even taking severe damage and an insane pain. The kid tries to keep his eyes open so he will not pass out. Seeing all this slowness, the flying creature stares at the wounded boy, finding his attitude really dumb. Flashing a little smirk, the beast mocks the guy for always using the same predictable and useless little trick. The brave hero ignores the trash talk and uses the last bit of his strength to try and stand up again. The bizarre bat keeps laughing and says that this weak effort is the most a human can handle. The evil beast looks at the young guy and notices that visual power is wrecking the guy's body, and the situation is very real, since the kid's life clock is dropping terrifyingly right in his eye. In this crazy panic, the redhead instantly remembers the very serious scolding the female commander gave him. The investigator blurted out that using the special eye recklessly would lead to a certain end right there. Doing some quick math in his head, the hero breaks a cold sweat, noticing that turning on the triple power drains many days. Fear hits hard, and the young guy realizes he only has a few seconds left before losing his actual life. Except to make the mess even worse, the terrifying bat will not stop firing those fatal spikes down there. Even knowing the situation is critical, the boy understands he cannot run and turns on the magic again. Ignoring the absurd pain, the kid pushes the limit and activates the fourth, and then the fifth layer right away. This madness makes the kid roar in pain, while the magic burns away his lifetime in the world. The system screen flashes, revealing that now the young fighter has much fewer days to breathe. Seeing the poor guy exhausted, the bat decides to swoop down hard, swearing to crush the kid real quick. The winged villain turns its scary face, thinking it only needs to finish off the blue police officer on the entire street. But to give the giant demon a scare, the smoke-covered street where the girl was standing seems empty. The beast uses its magical vision on the stone blocks, noticing the officer has totally vanished from there. The demon's brain totally bugs out, finding it impossible for the girl to disappear in the middle of all that explosion. Then the giant creature looks at the thousands of dark spears frozen in the air by the redhead's power. Exactly at that moment, our main character pushes the spell to the max and forces the sixth light to turn on. Gritting his teeth and holding back a scream of pain, the boy does not back down and activates the seventh round right away. With that, the many dangerous spikes stopped in the sky form a very crazy staircase going up into the air. The flying bat gets totally suspicious, thinking the whole situation got way too weird for its liking. The monster wonders why the kid will not stop, using that useless gift just to take heavy damage for nothing. Instantly, the beast's mind clicks, realizing what the real trap involving the armed girl was. Without wasting time, the evil villain points its face to the ground, trying to scan the battle area in desperation. The creature looks at the ruined buildings and at the boy on his knees, gasping for air, totally wrecked, and it becomes clear right away that the hero burned his whole life just to keep those spears frozen. The great giant bat widens its huge red eye, going into severe shock at the scene. In pure panic, the monster of darkness roars with hatred, realizing it lost sight of the blue woman. The red-haired boy coughs heavily and lets out a laugh, calling out from afar that she is not there anymore. With an intense, fatal look, the kid flashes an awesome smile, announcing that his partner is busy. And he gives the heads up that the girl helped with the scheme, while a huge trail of lightning shoots up the building. The big bat explodes with rage, cursing the duo. Noticing the boy was one hell of a live bait, the massive flying beast quickly looks at the blue light rising at top speed on the side of the tower. The monster realizes their setup was insane as it feels the dangerous hit coming from the side. The agent jumps masterfully off the tips of the frozen spears, making the beast panic. The girl used the paused rain of attacks as a perfect ladder to get close to the large target. Wrapped in awesome lightning, the brilliant police officer yells, saying the big bad is right in her sights. Right then, the beast realizes the boy froze the magical spears in the air to build a staircase path. The massive evil bat widens its red eye, finally catching on to the doe's entire scheme. The bizarre beast cracks an ugly smile, noticing the real trick behind that crazy defense. The demon figures out the boy took those hits to the face just to clear the way for the woman. Staring at the monster, the redhead gives a huge smile, making the villain think the kid has lost his mind. Giving the monster a scare, the officer jumps super fast across the spikes safely frozen in the sky. Seeing that the enemy was coming in hot, the giant creature bites its lips, getting really upset. Without thinking too much, the winged creature flaps its massive wings, wanting to flee to the top of the tall building. While climbing, the woman notices the spikes are running out and that she only needs one more jump. The villain tries to fly higher into the sky, holding absolute certainty that it was going to win that ugly clash. At that moment, the young guy's mind clearly remembers all the warnings given by the older leader. Hiding in a corner, the blue-haired woman says she fully understood the rookie's crazy idea. The investigator warns that if the enemy flies too high, that whole madness is going to end up going wrong. But the prodigy gives a sly little smile, announcing that he saved the best card to finish it all. Back to the fight, the woman prepares her strike, thinking the kid inherited his brother's craziness. The fully battered hero watches his coworker climbing the spikes with his eye glued straight on the monster. Holding a bizarre item, the kid hears his superior's final command shout from way up there, and with a focused look, the young guy turns off the special spell, releasing the lock holding the spears. At that exact moment, gravity kicks in, giving the awesome boost for the woman to use the final step. The sharp tip explodes in the sky, generating a very absurd power right behind the fierce officer. Several spikes fall, detonating hard in a bunch of giant fire explosions all over the building. The ugly monster gets a huge scare, feeling the intense heat of the smoke getting super close to it. The creature gets surrounded by many massive blasts. Not understanding how the humans pulled off that stunt, using the bomb's boost, the girl is thrown upward like a speeding rocket into the clouds. Tearing through the sky, the warrior rises in the middle of a blue glow, reaching the exact height of the bat. The beast widens its face, realizing the woman used the bombs to gain momentum like that. Wrapped in an epic energy, the agent ends up surpassing the height of the great giant monster. Taking magical hits to the face, the ugly beast roars in intense pain, feeling its body fry in the fire. Extremely dizzy, the big bat loses the strength in its wings and drops like a rock to the street below. The giant beast tries to fix its flight, swearing to get revenge in combat, but the clash was far from over. With an epic smile, the woman casually agrees, saying the final heavy blow is still going to wreck it. Falling through the sky, the police officer places all her trust on the shoulders of the boy who set up that trap. She calmly thinks the redhead himself is going to deliver the final strike, finishing the monster off for good on the ground. The evil beast drops very fast like a meteor, wanting to smash the buildings across the entire asphalt. Not caring about his own injuries, the young guy sprints like crazy, running past the broken rocks. The villain spots the kid coming super fast at it again, and gets another incredibly terrifying scare. The young guy stops right in the middle of the crater, looking up and facing the giant beast crashing to the ground. Pulling out the strong tech sword, the kid throws it in the monster's face, that its pride messed it up. The boy readies his arm, preparing the strike, and remembers that the beast totally ignored his presence. Realizing it is going to be sliced to bits, the creature panics and cries, begging for a little break. But the redhead ignores the crying completely and grits his teeth, throwing all his strength into his main arm. With a truly epic swing, the boy unleashes a giant green blade, sweeping the entire area at once. The very strong green energy lights up the monster's tearful face before it takes an insane slash. Gasping for air and heavily injured, the hero congratulates the woman for putting her trust in a simple rookie. Right behind him, the ugly monster falls sliced in half, and the blue woman lands looking like a hero. Through her earpiece, the officer hears the squad confirming that the area has been completely cleared. With a very chill posture, the commander answers the crew, ordering them to wrap up that mission for good. She asks the guys to secure the region well, sneaking up quietly near her newest partner. The girl throws an awesome jacket to cover the kid's injuries and gives the young guy a victory hug. She cracks a joke saying she has never ridden on bombs, laughing at that crazy kid's wild plan. With that, the kid lets out a very relaxed laugh, apologizing for coming up with such a dangerous scheme. But suddenly, a very dark claw hits the asphalt with brutal force, breaking the entire place apart. The giant beast sprouts from the rebel, gasping for air, completely wrecked after that heavy hit to the face. The monster's core starts pumping out strong magic, and the creature curses the humans, totally furious. Immediately, the woman drops into a fighting stance alongside the kid, prepping their gear for the clash. The beast glares at the two with pure hatred in its eyes, calling the entire group disgusting bugs. Leaving everyone in shock, the big bat jumps toward the clouds, spreading that broken wing of its. The young fighter is stunned to see the enemy running away, but the officer notices a bizarre problem. The investigator warns that the guy's core broke and says that beast is going to go down real soon. The bat keeps flying up like crazy, covering the entire city with a very gross, dark liquid. Knowing it does not have much time left, the ugly beast decides to take a very insane action. The monster starts glowing in a terrifying way, pulling an absurd red energy in the air up there. With that, the squad notices things went bad up high, and everyone freezes, shaking in pure panic. The beast announces it is going to eliminate everyone, and the kid hears his mind beeping with extreme heat. The redhead fully grasps the situation unfolding, thinking the bat lost its mind and is going to explode completely. The blue-haired woman steps up looking very tense, yelling an urgent warning to the rookie boy. The boss shouts that the beast started its reckless dive and orders the entire crew to run super fast. The boy thinks the monster is going to fire all its spikes at once like fireworks over the city. The creature swoops down flying like a comet, wanting to crush the buildings on the completely destroyed street. Clenching his teeth, the redhead focuses his bizarre eye, wanting to stop the beast before the ground explodes. The demon dives at a very insane speed, wanting to cause a massive tragedy on the asphalt. But out of nowhere, a blinding golden light shines mysteriously, dropping from above the ugly monster. An absurd pillar of fire sprouts in the sky, crashing down on the creature and breaking it in a single hit. The super strong attack blows up the whole air, entirely canceling out the winged beast's explosion magic. When the glow fades, a thick black smoke covers everyone's vision on the street, getting in the way of the fight, and soon, a bizarre heavy impact hits the stone floor, kicking up a lot of dirt and bricks from the ground. The hero duo is completely paralyzed, noticing the brute force of that monstrous ability. The kid and his boss stare at the rocks, hoping the wind dies down to figure out who the crazy guy was. In the smoke, they notice the figure of a giant man standing right on top of a building, looking at the street. The mystery guy arrives holding the beast's body, and even mocks the woman, saying she was too slow. With a highly focused move, the new guy burns up whatever is left of the big bat, using a fierce flame. The blue-haired officer widens her eyes, asking in shock what the huge guy is doing there. The big brute rests a weapon on his shoulder, criticizing the girl's fighting skills in a very arrogant way. The pressure from that extremely buff guy leaves the heroes sweating with fear, realizing he is dangerous. This muscle-bound monster is actually Ryoga, the tough boss of the second team from the main battle base. The next day, the scene skips back to the government's grand, glowing base in the rich area. Our red-haired warrior is seen looking super sad and all alone in the very weird, small gray cell. The young guy waits quietly, watching the time pass on the clock panel hanging on the white wall. Sitting on the metal, the kid's hand shakes as he remembers the very frantic brawl from the day before. The boy stares at his blinking palm, quietly saying the name of the huge guy who saved the day. In the kid's mind, the massive guy pops up in the fire, throwing his destructive punch down on the rocks. The boy's memory focuses on the giant with a scary aura of hot fire, pulling in a lot of magical power. The kid remembers the exact minute the huge guy hit the asphalt with sheer force near his partner. The impact of the warrior's iron boot knocked down a massive pillar, showing off a lot of style and power. That massive swagger made the redhead and the leader take a few steps back in shock at that old man. But with a quick jump, the guy grabbed the kid's shirt using his fiery hand, not caring about anything else. Lifting the young man into the air, the redhead dangled, wanting to get away from that blazing hot arm near his face. The big guy stared right into the boy's soul, while the kid practically melted from how hot it was right then. With that, the special eye turned on by itself, noticing the brute had an absurd amount of power stored up. The young guy opened his eyes wide, seeing that the giant's power rivaled the badass leader Raiji. The huge man focuses a look of hatred and lets out a yell, asking if the old strong guy really met his end. Holding the kid like a grocery bag, the old man scorches the face of the agent who was standing there. The woman shakes her head, dripping with sweat, not wanting to cross her very tough boss. Without any pity in his heart, the muscle master tosses the broken kid on the ground, calling him useless. The big brute says straight to his face that the old owner of the magic was totally useless in the fights around there. Thrown on the street, the boy gets furious at that nonsense, hearing his idol getting trashed. With that, the kid lunges, wanting to bite the guy's ankle, but the buff man just casually mocks the blue woman. The rich guy says that ignoring the rules is a dirty move and leaves the girl quiet while the kid boils with anger. Then an awesome ship cuts through the clouds, lowering its rant for the old fire guy to tell everyone to get lost. Holding that massive sword and laughing at everyone's teary faces, the leader takes charge of the whole operation. Checking out the heroes, the big brute says there better be no messing around, or he will crush everyone in the fire. Snapping out of the memory, the caged young guy tries to accept the overpowered strength of the other team's commander. But out of nowhere, the metal locking him and makes a noise and opens, catching the kid's focus really fast. His awesome partner arrives at the door, telling him to poke his head out of that dark cell right now. The boy jumps out of bed, loving to see the police officer arriving, almost wanting to cry her name out. With that, the two start a stroll in total silence, walking through the bright tunnels of the headquarters. While stepping on the smooth floor, the boy looks at his boots, feeling really bad for dragging her into trouble. The rookie kid pours his heart out, swearing that taking the heat from the base was entirely his fault. Hearing that whole dramatic speech, the experienced girl hits the brakes and faces the kid eye to eye. The police officer gives it to him straight, saying their job is dangerous, and the scolding was actually pretty light in the end. And in a focused chat, the agent delivers a message showing pity, saying he only has 6 years left. The warrior looks at the screens showing the tense time, and the girl warns that a single injury will end him right there. In a serious mood, the woman drops a hint, asking if he can handle the pressure of being a guy from the base. The main character holds his breath, staying very quiet, feeling the heavy weight of her words hitting him. At that very moment, the face of the great old teacher with the white cape flashes in the little boy's heart. Our hero gives a beautiful smile, swearing he is going all the way since the old man in white helped him. The warrior girl also cracks a small smile, mentioning that the boss in the cape saved her a lot before. With a cute smile, the girl crosses her fingers, swearing to stick right by the boy so he never does anything stupid. Super happy at the base, the kid points his glove at the police officer, thinking the duo is sharper than ever. The young guy says he is pumped for action, totally excited, already realizing their street fighting is just getting started. His awesome partner lets out a contagious laugh and gives that epic bro fist bump with the kid. But suddenly, a short guy in a green hat drops down, flying upside down, scaring everyone in the place. The duo nearly cries in fear from the jump scare of that little brat swinging like clothes on a flying cloudless line. Doing a ninja-like trick, the tiny guy flips and grabs the redhead's face, messing with him for real. The weird little dude touches the redhead, pulling back the skin of his eye, wanting to snoop on that stolen power. Laughing casually while hanging, the crazy guy swears that eye right there is the awesome timeline one that everybody wants. Getting slapped by the kid, the redhead yells out, annoyed, demanding urgent help from his police friend. The short guy laughs at the misfortune and says, "What's up?" revealing he is the big boss of the weapons created in the lab. Going a mid-air trick, the little guy lands smoothly and does that slick turn with his arms crossed. Looking at the brat, The redhead realizes the short guy wears a boss uniform, just like the pure fire monster. By the shoulder pads on his cape, the duo quickly understands that the little genius is another big shot commanding the place. The mini-boss says his name is Wakaba, swearing to give some solid help on those crazy tests for the blind redhead. The rookie almost falls backward upon noticing that the brat leads on the exact same floor as the intense fire muscle guy. Wearing some crazy glasses, the scientist checks that the little redhead's life battery is draining super fast. Looking completely lost, the police officer tries to figure out why the nerdy guy came down from his room. Holding his belt tight, the little nerd flashes a huge smile, asking the heroine to chill out. The genius kid takes a step forward, saying the blueprints requested by the captain are already way past done. The light-wielding redhead draws a blank, trying to guess what that epic mission was. The blue-haired girl slaps the hero in a serious tone, telling him to turn his face and follow along. Pulling his hat down, the kid laughs maliciously, warning that the redhead is never going to inherit the stolen eye. With that, the hero drops his face toward the white floor, shaking at the core from that little brat's nasty remark. But the weirdo explains that the big brains do not hand out intense weapons to just any random guy from the streets. Then, his partner focuses, saying that the rookie's future is going to be discussed today at the main base. By surprise, the short guy in the hat drags his shoe brake, coming to a bizarre stop on the smooth path, and soon turns back smiling, dropping the truth that handling things that way would be boring. Then the nerd points his finger to the door, calling the two forward to focus on a somewhat weird direction. Suddenly, the armored gate drops amidst a blaring of lights and reveals the super awesome fighting gym. And in this chaos, the red-haired kid yells upset, wanting to know about the intense plan the nerd just made up. With a goofy laugh, the captain announces a mock fight against a solid partner, just to earn some respect. The crew floods the giant area, seeing that blonde, massive guy waiting right in the middle of a ring. At that moment, the police officer gets super mad seeing the jerk opponent, and the light boy shakes in his boots. And in a very violent shock, the girl in blue screams at the top of her lungs, cursing at that dirty trick of a plan. Way too upset, the police officer warns the short nerd that the fight needed to happen against a regular soldier. Without catching a single clue, the rookie whines with his head in the clouds, staring at his furious friend's pure panic. But the short leader laughs a lot, joking that the blonde guy was the only one with free time around there. With a slightly dirty, sly smile, the little kid says that fight was the right one to settle the score. The huge guy stands there holding the iron handle, showing that he was the bodyman of the hardcore headquarters. Right at that moment, the short scientist lifts his face, calling the redhead to show off in a heavy showdown now. Deep in the background, the fire guy laughs in a mean way, telling the redhead to go cry in that tense fight. The kid's heart completely stops in his chest, realizing the fight is going to be against the monster captain.